This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I take the time out to remind you, as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, make sure you never miss an episode. I'll make sure you're always on top of whenever we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, give us a 5-star rating, write us a nice review, wherever you listen to your podcast. It'd be good, very appreciated, very helpful, allows you to guys like, what you guys dislike, the ways you can improve, all that fun stuff, topics you want us to discuss, all things like that. And also, if you don't want to do it there, you can find us on social media. If you're on there, we're on there. So you can find us at Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. And as I said, pre-bubble, as I've said at the beginning of the bubble, and as I've said for many days now, or many episodes now, I guess we'll since like last week when stuff got started. The race for the 8th seed in the West, easily the most exciting part of the bubble. Now, granted, as we discussed, a lot of the games have been good. Really doesn't matter the seeding. That's the benefit of having a bunch of playoff, quote unquote, caliber teams in the bubble or just playing against each other at the same time. You're going to bound to get good games. That's generally what the playoffs are. There are a lot of maybe outside of like the first round, you shouldn't really see teams getting blown out. You shouldn't really see teams losing by 20, 30 points, things like that. It happens every once in a while. Sometimes you just got an off night. It is what it is. But generally speaking, that's not something you see. You generally you're getting good games, good matchups, close games back and forth. This team makes a run, that team makes a run, different things like that. And that's what we've been seeing a lot of in the bubble so far. And speaking of making a run, I don't know what got into the Phoenix Suns. I don't know who told them to take this. I don't know who told them that they were the main attraction of the bubble. But they've arguably become that. They are, I think, one of 2 undefeated teams. If I'll double check that for you guys, but I'm pretty sure they're one of only 2 undefeated teams. They beat one of the undefeated teams, the Pacers, today. I think it's just them and the Rockets. Not Rockets, because the Rockets they lost to, who did they lose to? They lost to oh, wait, hold on now. Oh, the Rockets are 4-0 too. No, also Blazers. All right, yeah, I'm tweaking. Yeah, Carmelo. How could I forget that? Excuse me, that's my bad. So it's them and the Raptors. Them and the Raptors are the only undefeated teams currently in the bubble. And I mean, shout out to the Suns, because I think they came into the bubble in last place, obviously like the first back in the standings in the West. And now, as of today, they are the 10 seed. Yeah, they're the 10 seed. A game and a half back of Portland for that 8, and 2 games back of the Grizzlies for the 9. So there's a chance that them getting to the 8 seed would require Portland to start losing games, which we'll talk about them in a second. But they don't. Their next 2 games are a little bit more difficult. But again, you've now beaten the Nuggets and the Rockets, along with taking the Celtics down to the wire. And the Celtics were up big, and then the Blazers came back. But again, when you've beaten 2 of the top teams in the West, obviously standings-wise, the Rockets aren't, but in terms of like caliber of team and and talent and things like that, they're one of the better teams in the West. And they're 3-1 so far in the bubble. It's hard to just say that, the Clippers are going to beat them on Saturday. The Sixers are going to beat them on Sunday. You don't know that. And then they play the Mavs and the Nets the last 2 games in fairness, the Nets beat the Bucks. I'll talk about them in the next segment. But then they did lose to the Celtics last night, which is, again, the what should have happened to the Bucks. I don't really know how the Bucks allowed to happen. They lost by 30 to the Celtics, which is, again, what it should have been. But hey, it is what it is. Every team has an off night. But yeah, so like I was saying, shout out to the Suns. Shout out to my boy Devin Booker. Been a fan of his since the Kentucky days. If the Thunder had just traded up one spot to get him instead of waiting and having to draft Cam Payne, who looked good for the Suns today, so let me not... I can talk down on him because he was bad with the Thunder and was bad with the Bulls, though, in fairness, who hasn't really been bad with the Bulls over the last, 4 to 5 years outside of, outside the 1 year where they had, Jimmy Butler, D-Wade, and Rondo, and that team would have made it to the second round of the playoffs if Rondo didn't get hurt. And then Zach LaVine, every other player that's been with the Bulls has been at best. And worse than that, obviously at the worst. But yeah, so shout out to him. I guess he played well today for the Suns. Was big for them. Off the bench, he had what? He had a couple of threes. Hold on, he hit 3 threes. Okay, that's what I thought. 3 threes, had 15 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists off the bench for them. And again, that game against one of the other hot teams in the bubble coming in, the Pacers. But yeah, so back to my point, had the Thunder, I just traded up as I wanted them to do. Because again, once he started to fall, I was like, hey, why wait, go get him. There's probably a decent chance that he stays. That KD ends up staying in OKC because that would have provided them. Though obviously the defense isn't what it needs to be, but that would have provided them with that guy. Because the thing with the Thunder teams, they just didn't have anybody to really space the floor because they had no shooting, and obviously we know Devin Booker can shoot. So he would have been beneficial and very helpful to the team had he made it. And still, even, I guess how many years? He's 4 or 5 years into the league now? He's 5 years in and still only 23 years old. Doesn't turn 24 until October. I'll say it would have been there for a long haul. Again, you'll never know what could have been or what should have been. But, I imagine they could have used his 14 points per game. 34% three-point shooting as a rookie is not that good. But, again, he's on a bad team. He's having to carry the workload. And then, since then, he's been averaging 20 points. Granted, Suns are bad, but he's very good. So, he would be averaging... I think he would average 20 points on a lot of teams. You see Chris Middleton. Not to say that Devin Booker is better or worse than Chris Middleton, but teams are capable of having multiple 20-point scorers. That's the thing. I don't know if he would have been averaging 20, but he could have averaged anywhere between 15 and 18, and that would have been beneficial to the Thunder. But again, try not to look back too much because the Thunder now are very good. So at least for this year, we'll see how next year goes. Because we can't count on Chris Paul to have a clean bill of health every year, but we're here now, so we got to appreciate it. But yeah, shout out to the Suns. They're kind of doing what no one really expected because they were just kind of the throw-in team. Because they were all right, they met the threshold. It's all right, cool, we'll put them in. But no one was really that excited for them. They just thought, hey, let's see Devin Booker play a little bit. That'll be fun. And now they're legitimately in the race for a playoff spot. Like I said, it's going to be tough for them to pass the Blazers because they're a game and a half back of them. But all you need to do is get to that 9 seed. And then, hey, you're in the play-in game, then anything can happen from there. So see if the Suns can keep the hot streak going as the bubble games continue. But hey, like I said, shout out to them because they were a team that not many people thought could do something like this, and they got a shot. But their next few games are tough. They got the Heat, Thunder, and Sixers before they play the Mavericks. So who knows? But they already beat the Mavericks once. They already beat the Clippers. Like I said, they beat the Pacers who were playing well. So again, it's not like they've beaten nobody. It's the first game against the Wizards, but since then they've beaten quality opponents. So you can't just assume that all right, this game's a loss. No, you got to play the games. You got to play the games. So like I said, shout out to them. shout out to the Blazers for continuing to do their thing. They beat the Nuggets today pretty handedly by 10, 125-115. Dame had 11 threes, 45 points. Gary Trent Jr. once again, as we talked about on the last podcast, great, or if it wasn't the last podcast before, great off the bench for them. Had 7 more threes today. Continuous his hot shooting in the bubble. Been, again, if it's not for Dame, would have been maybe arguably the Blazers' best player in the bubble, or at least their most vital player. He's shooting. I mean, he's had at least 16 points in every game. Has a game with 21 in which they lost, but had 21. Had 27. Like I said, he's playing great. He is playing great, and that's really all you can ask for at this point. Just for your people to play great when you need for them to play great. And like I said, that's what he's doing. So that'll be nice. He's hit what? 4, 11, so that's 8, 14, 22 threes in 4 games. Yeah, 22 threes in 4 games. So what? That's like 5 a game, something like that. Absurd. And again, they need all these points because they're not the most sound defensive team. And again, you need somebody out there to help keep the attention off Dame and off of CJ. But then if you can just load up on them and no one else around you is hitting shots, that's kind of the issue. Once they got to the conference finals last year, like Aminu and Harkless, those guys weren't hitting the shots as much as they were. So then as they could, and plus they didn't have Nurkic and things like that. But so then when Dame was off, or like CJ was off, you couldn't really trust those other guys to hit the shots. And now you have at least one guy who so far, we'll see if it continues, but so far can be trusted to hit those shots. Like I said, he's hit 22 threes on 19, 30, 35 attempts. So 22 out of 35, if my math is right. Shooting about 63% from 3 in the 4 games in the bubble so far. Absurd. Like I said, he's going to, if he continues to play like that, he could be a key for the Blazers if they want to upset some people. Mainly the Lakers in the first round. Speaking of them, they have to get some things together. Their offense in the bubble, very shaky. They've been one of the better offensive teams throughout the season, but so far during the restart, hasn't looked great. And granted, tonight they rested LeBron, but it didn't look good yesterday when they played OKC. Only scored 86 points. LeBron didn't play well. AD didn't play well. The Thunder were able to get by using multiple rookies on him in Dort and Bazley obviously, LeBron's still LeBron. He's going to get some points, but there were times where both those guys were offering resistance in a situation where you would think LeBron should not be able to be handled, even minimally, by a rookie. Especially a guy like Bazley who's not. At least Dort's a little shorter, a little stockier, a little bit stronger. Bazley's like he's only like 19 years old, tall, skinny kind of guy, and still he was able to stay in front of him, handled him in the post a little bit. Like I said, LeBron wasn't just out there dominating him. Even like they were to put Robeson on him, which is nice. So yeah, he wasn't that great in that game. Shot for, I believe it was 7 of 19 from the field. Yeah, like I said, Anthony Davis had like 9 points, something like that. So yeah, their offense has been shaky. They're against the Raptors, they only scored 92 points. The Clippers, they scored 103, but even in that game, LeBron didn't really play that well either. So it's just one of those things where, again, I'm not going to say you're not going to take these games serious, and I don't know what their mindset is after they clinched the 1 seed. Because again, once they did that, everything's kind of just like it is what it is at this point. But with only 3 games left, you got to get some sort of rhythm going heading into the playoffs. And I know you got the 1 seed, you got all that stuff, but as I saw someone point out on Twitter, and I think it's kind of true, having the number 1 seed doesn't matter as much this year. Again, it can matter for like seeding wise, like what bracket you're in, who you're going to be matched up with in the second round, in the conference finals, things like that. But in terms of like the home court advantage, like that doesn't exist. Like it's not like, all right, you want the 1 seed so that every game you get more home games. Like you're playing in Orlando. Like, all right, maybe that means you get more virtual fans and stuff, but that, like, what does that do? Honestly. like I said, the 1 seed doesn't mean as much this year. Even all the seeds, really, you could argue, don't mean as much this year because you're not playing any games on your home court. Because that's the whole point of getting home court advantage. Like, all right, you play as many home games as possible, but all right, they may be the home team more often, but it's still all the games are in Orlando. Everybody's playing on the same courts. It's no different for anybody. So and everyone's dealing with the same type of factors, same type of crowd, noise, different things like that. So there's no advantage, in my opinion, to being a higher seed this year, as opposed to obviously every other year being a higher seed means more home games. So that's important. So, like I said, even though all right, they stood up the 1 seed, all right, they don't take it as serious, quote unquote, but they need to show something offensively at least before you head into the playoffs. And granted, if they get a team like the Suns or the Grizzlies or the Blazers in the first round, none of those guys are defensive juggernauts, so maybe that'll help get their offense together. But the thing with that is, especially the Blazers, if they get them, those teams can score offensive. I mean, that team can score. Sorry, you're playing offense well. I mean, maybe a little bit better, but this team's not going to be. They're not just gonna. It's not their. They're not there. The Jazz, where a lot of those good Jazz teams were, or a lot of those good Jazz teams in recent years have been defensive minded, and they score enough just to keep pace. No, this team's the Blazers are gonna try to get up and down the floor a little bit. They're gonna shoot a lot of threes. They're gonna try to score. They're gonna use Nurkic down in there on the post. And then, again, they're not terrible defensively. They're just not. Again, like the Clippers or something. You would say the Raptors. They're not, or even like the Bucks. And, we'll talk about the Bucks. Their defense has still been a little shaky, personally. But yeah, they're not one of those teams. So, all right, maybe you'll get a better rhythm. But I'm just saying, if it takes LeBron a game or two to heat up, or it takes an maybe not AD, but LeBron or Danny Green who's been struggling in the bubble, or maybe Kyle Kuzma's shot's not going down, things like that. That could be trouble for them because the Blazers are going to score points. Again, unless you're just playing the peak defense, which they have been very sound defensively, at least in the bubble, which is good. So you think eventually the offense will catch up, but you only have 3 more games left for it to catch up before you start games that, whether or not you think these games matter, those games do. And like I said, you don't want to try to rev it up once the playoff games start. That doesn't seem like the best case situation or scenario to me personally. But again, I'm not the Lakers. I'm not LeBron. Who knows if they'll be all right. But yeah, just my 2 cents on that. Also, a shout out to the Pelicans for wasting league resources because again, I think Zion again played 20 some minutes in the 20s. I don't know why they brought him. Why did they bring him down here if he wasn't going to play real minutes? I don't get it. They lost by 15 to the Kings. They're now in last place in the standings of the teams in the restart. Yeah, 24 points, 10 of 12 in 22 minutes. It's why not? And again, I don't know what I wasn't able to watch that game, so I don't know what the game flow or different things like that, or when he got his points or how he was getting them. But I'm just in these games where literally all of them matter, because in theory you're trying to make the playoffs, why not play him more? If he can, or if he can't, then why even what is the point of the minutes restriction at this point? Again, early in the season, I get it because you're trying to work him back. Then eventually he'll be good to go for the rest of the season. But if he's not good to go now, when will he be? Because there's only be 4 games left in their season. And like I said, it was set up nicely for them outside the Clippers. They played Clippers and Jazz. You could argue they didn't play any good teams. They played all teams that they were going to have to get by to reach where they're at. Like I said, they played the Kings, they played the Grizzlies, who's their only win. They play the Wizards next game. That should be a win, but who knows? They play the Spurs. Who knows? They play the Kings again. They already lost to them. They play the Magic, who might have a spot locked up at that point, but, a playoff spot that... all right. Well, yeah, no, I don't think they technically have a playoff spot locked up, but they might have it at that point, so they may be resting people. But again, if you're not... Unless things are tight, it's not going to matter, because you're not going to be close enough to be in that play-in game. Because then you have to be either 8 or 9, and then 9 within 4 games, which it sounds like that's going to be the case at this point. So yeah, you got to be up there, and you're going to have to count on a lot of teams ahead of you to lose who are playing better than you are right now. So, let's the NBA try to set it up to get Zion in the playoffs, but now, I mean, anything but the Spurs, I think the NBA will be fine with. Even the Kings, that'd be kind of a cool story. But yeah, Suns, they'd be happy with. Blazers, obviously. Grizzlies, obviously. But anybody but the Spurs, and I think all basketball fans would be happy to get into the playoffs. No knock on the Spurs, but like, nah, we're good. Well, I'm good at least, so I can say that. So hopefully the Blazers get it. That'd be the most interesting first round matchup, in my opinion. But yeah, so talk about the West. Flip over to the East real quick. Talk about them. Talk about the Bucks. They came out shaky again today. See if I'll let you know if you didn't see the game, if they were able to recover. Talk about the Sixers dealing with injuries and a few other things. So we'll touch on that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Network. So Ben Simmons, he had to leave Wednesday's win against the Wizards early due to an injury, and at the time it was like, oh, he'll be alright, it's only day to day, and you're just like, oh, okay, cool, like, alright, it's nothing too serious, like, he'll be, like, I think he was able to, like, walk off the floor and everything, so it's like, alright, he'll be fine, you like, rest him for like a game or two, and he'll be back. But if you're a Philly sports fan, you know what day-to-day means. Well, at least if you're an Eagles fan. You know what day-to-day means, and again, the Eagles have had an interesting injury history in recent years, just like the Sixers have had over how many ever years it's been now for them, with the different guys going down for extended periods of time with weird ailments. But yeah, if you're an Eagles fan, you know that day-to-day can mean anything from a couple of days, a week maybe, to done for the season. Again, that's just like, I don't know if that's a Philly thing or that's just like a Doug thing, but like for whatever reason, he'll save somebody's day to day, and next thing you know, they'll be out a month and a half, and you'll just be like really confused as to how, like, because day to day means like, all right, like it should get better as the days go on, you would think. So then when you first saw that, you're like, oh, okay, he's gonna be fine. I know somebody I saw on Twitter who happens to be an Eagle fan. He made a similar comment, just like when they saw that Ben Simmons was day to day, he's like, all right, well, see you next year, Ben. And then now we have that he's out indefinitely. So, not exactly at that point, but we're closer to that than we initially thought. The Sixers announced on Thursday that he suffered a subluxation of his left patella, a partially dislocated kneecap, in his left leg. He is now out indefinitely. And also the Sixers apparently did not sound optimistic about his outlook. This one stings for sure. Head coach Brett Brown told reporters from Yahoo Sports, but again, you can find this news anywhere. We all felt like with the pandemic, it obviously bought time for Ben, because obviously, if you were paying attention to the Sixers, or if you're a Sixers fan, or even if you weren't, Ben was out when the pandemic hit. He had last played a game, I believe it was February 22nd against the Bucks. I think it was the back. That was when the back gave out. I remember watching that game. I think it was like a TNT game too. And I remember watching it like, Ben Simmons is hurt, but they're keeping him in the game. I don't know why they're keeping him in the game, but they're keeping him in the game. He looks very hurt. Like, they should get him out. and then they didn't, and they ended up losing, so it is what it is. But yeah, I think how many he played? All of 5 minutes. Because again, he was like working through something in the back, and then they tried to play. Then he went up for like a layup or was dribbling the ball up the court or a rebound, something like that. And the back just gave out. You could see him like laboring until they finally subbed him out. And I was like, what was Brett Brown looking at? But hey, so yeah, he hadn't played since that day, and then he missed the rest of February, which was only it was like 3 more games, and then he missed all their games in March, and then the pandemic hit. So I was like, all right, okay, cool. Bought him some time. He should be back, should be healthy, ready to go. We saw him in pictures looking buff. Got the biceps going and everything. So there was that. He was looking all right in the scrimmage games. Didn't look too good in the actual games. Well, at least not in all the actual games, because I think it was the Wizards. Even in the Wizards game before he got hurt, he only had like 8 points in like 23 minutes, 2 of 10 from the field. He had some nice assists though. I'll give him that. That's the one thing. If nothing else, he's going to usually play solid defense, other than I guess if T.J. Warren is playing against him, and he's going to have some nice passes. And then in the Spurs game, he was like 4 for 6, 8 points, fouled out, 5 assists, 2 rebounds. So again, they needed him. Or could have gotten better from him, I should say. And he was like, all right. And they ended up winning the game mainly because of Shake Milton. Well, at least at the end. Obviously, Embiid and Tobias Harris played well. And that was the real reason why they won. But they were in that position. And because of them, and then Shake Milton was able to capitalize. But yeah, so now he's out for who knows how long. And it's unfortunate, but this isn't like new territory for the Sixers. Like, because he's been out, whether it's this year or last year or whenever, like they've played games without him. And again, it just stokes more fuel to the fire of the whole, like maybe Ben Simmons and Embiid don't work thing. Because if they look fine without him, they're like, see, we need to trade him, and blah, blah. And we'll see. Again, Embiid's been playing great, so they might be fine without him anyway. And also their schedule isn't necessarily the toughest. Again, Embiid had 30 points, 11 or 20 from the field, 11 rebounds against the Wizards. Though, I mean, their center is Thomas Bryant. Like, yeah, he's not big enough. Or they might try to put Mo Wagner on him. It's not. That's not going to be enough. Not for Embiid. But their schedule isn't really that hard for the last 5 games. They got the Magic on Friday. They got the Blazers, Suns, who, all right, maybe that's not okay. Hold on. Outside the Magic, this might not be as easy as I thought, because then you have the Blazers, who are playing well, at least, and again with no Ben Simmons. That's one less guy to guard the Dames, CJs, Gary Trents of the world. Maybe even again now you might be able to let Melo get off a little bit. Then the Suns, who are playing well at the very least, and then play the Raptors. Played great. You got to hope maybe you catch them on an off night, or maybe they're resting people, because that'd be the second to last game for the Sixers in the bubble. I don't know what game it would be for the Raptors, but it'd be near the end, so they might just be getting ready for the playoffs. And the last game they play the Rockets, so it's another one you might. And same thing with the Sixers; they might be resting people too. We'll see how that goes. But you're going to at least have a few games with him or without him to see how that works, and I guess try to reconfigure the lineup though. I guess you put Al Horford back in the starting lineup. Like, that's not, like, they took him out. Well, they took him out because you can't have 2 non-shooters around Embiid, and now I guess you're back to only 1. So, like, maybe it'll work. I don't know. We'll see how it goes against the Magic on Friday. But again, not unfamiliar territory for the Sixers, so unfortunate, but they've been here before. They can deal with it. And then we'll see how long Ben Simmons is out, because, again, Embiid is great. They could be fine without him, but they're not going to make it that far in the playoffs without Ben Simmons. Point blank period. He's their best defender. He's one of the best defenders in the league. He's useful on offense when he's like being aggressive. Like, there's a reason why they have the two of them, him and Embiid, together. There's a reason why, again, because if they wanted to, they could have would have run of them, I guess. But they have them together because they know that at the very least, there's a chance those might be the 2 best players in a series, depending on who you match up against. So you want to hope to get him back at some point, but I guess we'll kind of keep our eye on that and see how that timeline progresses with his injury. But yeah, so that was interesting. Also, we had an interesting matchup with the Heat and the Bucks, because the Heat have had a very rough schedule. They did not get any favors this week. They had the Raptors Monday, who they lost to, a close one. They could have won that game. Again, had a turnover late. Then they beat the Celtics on Tuesday. Then they played the Bucks today. Then they play the Suns on... Okay, they play the Suns, Pacers, Heat, and then Pacers again. Yeah, normally you'd be like, oh, Suns is a cakewalk. Like, no, the Suns are playing well. So you can't say that anymore, granted. Should they beat them? Yes, but still, the Clippers should have beat the Suns. And yeah, here we are, the Suns are 4-0. So yeah, they're definitely not the easiest schedule, but they had a game. Like I said, they played the Bucks earlier today, and this was another game much like with the Lakers. You were wondering like, oh, are the Bucks just kind of like coasting through these games? Because they were down bad in the first half, down what I think it is. I think down like 7. Yeah, like 17 heading into half. And then like the fourth quarter, the Bucks just was like, you know what happened if we started playing like the Bucks? Oh, we dominate? Oh, okay, let's do that then. And then they did. They held the Heat to 18 points there in that fourth quarter. Though, some of that was just because the Heat were missing threes that they were making before. And much like we saw with the Rockets game, the Bucks' defense to just allow teams to shoot threes more or less is going to come back to bite them at some point, I think. Because that doesn't sound like a sound strategy. And that's part of the reason why the Heat were dominating them in the beginning. Was because they were knocking down the threes, even though, like, not Embiid, Giannis was playing well, Middleton was playing well. I think he was also I'm trying to remember if he was in foul trouble in that first half. Maybe that helped. But yeah, like they were playing well, but they were just letting people knock down threes. Like Hero for the game had 20 points off the bench. He was good in the first half. Duncan Robinson hit 5 threes. Crowder hit 4 threes. Nunn hit 4 threes, even though he was 4 of 10, so that wasn't really that great. Even Derrick Jones hit a couple threes. Iggy hit a couple threes. So that's the thing is that, all right, the Bucks were able to turn it on, tighten up the defense in the fourth, which helped, but you can't just let teams shoot 45%, 46% from 3 against you and think you're going to beat a lot of teams in the playoffs. Especially not this Heat team who was out without Jimmy Butler. So no Jimmy, that hurt. And then also no Dragic, so they didn't really have a real point guard coming off the bench. They were having Iggy initiate the offense in that third and fourth quarter, and I was like, yeah, I don't like this lineup at all, Spoelstra. But hey, it is what it is. You gotta take the hand you're dealt, or the hand that you're dealt. So it is what again, people are hurt. You gotta utilize it. But that lineup, I think it was Iggy, Hero. I think it was Duncan Robinson, like Olynyk and Crowder. I hope they don't try that out there in the playoffs, because that lineup was not doing it in the fourth. I think that was the lineup. But I just know it was whatever lineup that had Iggy running point, and I was like, this isn't it. And they kind of struggled, and then the Bucks were able to get back, and then they were able to turn it on from there. And then even at that point, they couldn't even use Bam that much in the second half because Bam was in foul trouble. Had like 5, which was funny because I think it was the Ringer, or a lot of people were talking about how like, oh, Bam is the perfect defender for Giannis. Oh, how he's been so good against Giannis this year. And then apparently Giannis must have read that or heard that because, again, they got nothing but free time down there in the bubble. And he took it to Bam a little bit today. Took it to the Heat in general. Like I said, had 33 points on 13 of 17. Shooting was only misses came from 3-point range. He was 0 for 4. So basically he was 13 of 13 from everywhere on the court but the free throw line. Also had 7 free throws. Had 12 rebounds. Middleton was good again, 33 points. 10 of 10 from the free throw line, hit 5 threes. So, yeah, the defense that we thought was there was not there. But, like I said, the Bucks, look, they were sleepwalking the first half to turn it on, so that's good to see, because that's something the Lakers haven't done yet, really, outside of that Clippers game, is, like, be down and kind of, like, pull back, even, like I said, against the Thunder. They were playing in their starters. Like, they weren't, it's not like, oh, they had minutes restrictions on LeBron, they had minutes restrictions on AD. Like, no, those guys were in and playing in the fourth quarter when the game was somewhat within reach. They went on a run, they just weren't able to do it. The Bucks were able to do it. But as I've said, this philosophy to just let teams shoot threes, because, as I said, the Heat hit 21, like, that can't be the strategy. Granted, it worked today, but I'm just like, they got to tighten up on the defense on the 3-point line, in my personal opinion. Because, especially against a team like the Heat, who are, I believe they said, the number 1 3-point team in the league this year. Like, all right, if they could, if some of those shots late had just gone in instead of, like, rimming out or, like, being a little short or whatever, because like I said, they struggled for the field in that fourth quarter. A lot of that had to do with the fact they didn't really have a real guy to initiate the offense, because their point guard was Iggy, and he can't really knock down threes like that. So that hurts. But I'm saying, like, if they just shot a little bit better, then that game maybe still stays close. Because there were times where they had it close, and then they just, like I said, they had a three and it just like rimmed out, or they had a three and it was just like off back rim or a little short, something like that. Like, they just weren't able to get that three to really, after a certain point, they weren't able to get that three in the fourth quarter to keep them within the game. So, good for the Bucks to be able to, again, kind of bounce back, because they've been looking a little shaky in the bubble. The one seeds have been looking a little shaky, and I was like, at least the Bucks have the luxury of playing like the Magic or the Nets, whoever, in the first round, so that'll be their like warm up. But the Lakers don't have that, so they got to make sure they're on top of their game from game one in the playoffs. If not, they run the risk of being upset. But yeah, so the Bucks out together. Shout out to them, and yeah, just more bubble watch. More and more bubble watch. That'll be interesting to see as we continue on. Like I said, go through the weekend, go through next week, because before the playoffs start, I think the playoffs start like next weekend. I believe. Actually, I don't know. It might be because they got to do the playing game first. I don't know exactly what the timetable is on that, but it'll be within the next 2 weeks. The playoffs will have started. So I know everybody's happy for that. I know I am, because it gets to be some real meaningful basketball. Not that this basketball isn't meaningful, not that it isn't fun, but now we get down to like, all right, the games really, really matter. You can't be like, oh, we got the one seed, like we're chilling, like, oh, this one loss is no big deal. Like, no, now these losses will be big deals. So I look forward to that. And hopefully, no positive tests. Like I said, the real test would be when the families come down, but for the time being, the bubble's working. I would like for it to continue to work, because I don't know what the NFL is going to do, and because their plan seems like a mess. MLB is a similar situation. We'll see how long they can go COVID-free, because they haven't really had anything new since the Cardinals situation. So that's good. At least, and I would say the NHL, their round-robin tournaments or their qualifying stuff is going on without a hitch. So you love to see that. But yeah, sports are back, and we are all happy to have them. But, as I mentioned, the NFL may be a little bit in jeopardy. And God, football season is going to be a mess. And that's why more players have continued to opt out. So, I want to talk about that. And also, there's one player who isn't opting out, but is going to have to sit out the season due to complications from that Rona. Which, as I said, just because you're alive does not mean everything is fine. So we'll discuss the opt-outs and the player who's going to have to miss the season due to complications from that, and a combination of other things right after a break. So stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Podcast Network. So, as I talked about on the last episode, at that point, it was only 2 and a possible opt-outs from the college football season so far. Those being Caleb Farley, and Rashard Bateman. And Michael Parsons was supposed to announce, but then he didn't announce till like earlier today, which was like kind of confusing to me. Not because he was like he had to do it on timetable, but it was just like the guy initially reported it and said it was either going to come later Tuesday or early Wednesday. So I was like, when it had come to Thursday and he hadn't said anything yet, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Just mainly because I was wondering if it was one of those things where he was getting like cold feet or like people trying to talk him out of it, which again, I imagine people tried to do anyway, but like I was hoping that wouldn't have caused him to sway his decision, because if he had decided for himself and for his family, like it's best if I don't play, then like don't try to go back on that. But also they I guess they made a nice little video. Well, he made a nice little video kind of walking through his decision, and like they shot it. So maybe that's what he was doing the last few days, was just like shooting. But then again, he was in like sweatshirts and like sweatpants and stuff, and I don't know what it's like up at State College right now, but I imagine it's pretty warm. So like the video couldn't have been, like the shots in the video couldn't have been from recently, you would think. I don't know, maybe he runs cold. Who knows? But yeah, that was kind of curious. But again, he did end up posting the video, and he is officially opted out, that being Micah Parsons. And we can add 2 more names to that list now. The first being Rondell Moore, wide receiver from Purdue, who's a redshirt sophomore. He spent most of last year hurt, actually. So this is an interesting decision for him, because it's not like with Bateman and with Parsons, like both, and then even Farley. Those 3 guys had all played pretty well in 2019. Even the next guy, who we're going to talk about in a second, he played pretty well in 2019. So I'm intrigued on the decision by Moore, just because the other 4 guys are probably, I mean, Parsons definitely consensus. The other guy we'll talk about in a second, definitely consensus. Bateman could go first or second, and I imagine same thing with Farley. He probably could go, or Fairley. He could probably go. I think this thing, it should be Farley. There's no I. Farley. He'll either go first or second round at worst. I mean, some people have him as one of the top corners. I don't know exactly, because I guess we'll have to see who declares and who doesn't declare. But he is one of the better corners in the country, so there's at least a chance for first round pick. So then you got those 4 guys that are almost locked. And Rondell Moore, based off his freshman year, he might have been a lock, where he had 114 receptions for like 1,250 yards and 12 touchdowns. Also rushed for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't know if he had any return touchdowns with that as well. But again, he was just electrifying from like the moment he stepped on to Purdue and was on the field. He was one of the best, and then also one of the most electrifying players in the country. But then last year was marred a lot of injuries and stuff like that. He only had 29 receptions and 387 yards and 2 touchdowns in 4 games, again due to injuries. So it is intriguing that he decided to opt out, just because, like I said, there was probably more stuff for him to go off of. Like, at least these guys are going, their most recent film, their most recent tape, their most recent season is pretty good. That they were like, all right, these are some of the top players in the draft. Moore could still be one of the top players when healthy, and at least he should be healthy. But you kind of wanted to see it too. You don't not just want to have to go back. Like, it's already gonna be bad enough some of these teams having to go back on year-old film to watch guys. Now most of these teams have to go back on 2 years old film from Rondell Moore, and it's gonna be hard. How do you base a draft grade or how do you judge that when like the tape is that old? It'll be interesting to see how that works. So, like I said, yeah, he decided to opt out. He said in a Twitter statement, "My goals during my college experience were to earn a degree and prepare for the possibility of the NFL. With the tremendous help of the academic support and a remarkable group of professors, I am on track to complete my degree in 2.5 years this December. Goals accomplished," he said, was marking the best choice for his family by opting out. And obviously it hurts Purdue, but they had David Bell, who was really good as a freshman. I guess they got another receiver, Ahmad Anderson Jr., who could step in and help replace him. Though, again, they spent a lot of time without him last year, so that helps these kind of guys where they already have this experience of being without him, so it's not like a new thing. But yeah, obviously it would make a big difference. And I mean, who knows, we can have a full season anyway, so who cares? But he decided to opt out. And then the second guy I was alluding to earlier was Gregory Rousseau. I hope that's how you pronounce it right. Redshirt sophomore from Miami, who was coming off a season with 51 solo and assisted tackles, 19.5 tackles for loss, 15.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 pass breakup. So yeah, one of the better edge rushers heading into this upcoming draft. And now he's no more. at least in terms of this college season. So he said, or his reasoning behind it was, well, one, he was already pretty good. There's no real need for him. He was second in the nation in sacks last year behind only Chase Young, and we saw where Chase Young got drafted. And apparently, like, no ill will with the coaches or anything, him decided to opt out. Though, I am curious because they didn't, at least on ESPN, they didn't, like, everybody else, they make mention of why he opted out. But it just seems like he, they're just opting out just to opt out. Like, everyone else had, like, a big, long, like, oh, this is why I'm doing it. I'll look that up on Twitter real quick just to see if there was, like, any messaging or something that he put out. I feel like that's pretty interesting. The fact that he was, like I said, he was opting out, but I haven't seen an official statement. Let me see if there's any statement from him. Okay, so the coach said Gregory Rose let us know he's not playing football in the fall. And again, he did no ill will towards him or anything. But I guess he just said that he wasn't going to play. It doesn't really seem like he put out like a long statement. Because just a few, like again, last week when they were put out the ACC football model for the schedule, he put the eye emojis over the ACC football tweet. So that was interesting. And he also tweeted a tweet from the Canes football account about how the best defensive ends in the country are ready to wreak havoc this year, no matter the circumstances. And now he's opting out. So, that's interesting. I don't know if it's just one of those things where he saw some guys doing it and he was like, you know what? Yeah, this probably isn't worth it for me either. And it's fair. He's been very good at his time in Miami, so he probably didn't need it necessarily, but again, there's just I am interested in the fact that he didn't like put out an official like statement other than like through the coach. But even going back to 2 years ago, because he was pretty good as a freshman too, if I remember correctly. So again, it's not like he really needed the numbers. He had was it just last year? This is first year he was good. I thought he was good as a freshman. I'm bugging. No, I guess he was a freshman this past year. So there is that. So yeah, he's only got 1 year of film to go off of. I thought he was like a redshirt sophomore that... Oh, no, because if you're a redshirt sophomore this year, then that means he didn't play as a freshman, obviously. Come on, Chris, you know that. So yeah, but hey, if you come in your first year in college football and you do that, you probably are pro ready, so I get it. But yeah, it's interesting to see who else is going to opt out. Obviously, you haven't had any quarterbacks opt out, any linemen or anything like that opt out. And that'll be the real interesting test. Like if a guy like Trevor Lawrence, he's not going to opt out. There's no way Dad would let him. But like if a guy like that, like a Justin Fields, those type of players, those type of like premier quarterbacks, is that was the big thing with the NFL, because I know there was some tweets about like, oh, big name guys are going to opt out. And none really did. The only one that really got close was Trey White, and he decided not to, even though he was conflicted up until this morning when he put out a tweet talking about people bashing him for considering. And I think that's just the selfish nature of sports fans, that they forget that you are human at the end of the day and not just an athlete mainly used for their own entertainment and enjoyment. They're like, at the end of the day, like, these guys have real decisions to make about their real lives. And if he wanted to opt out, he shouldn't have been condemned for that, even though it sounded like he got some backlash. But he didn't end up opting out, so it is what it is. But yeah, we'll see if any of the like other... I don't know if there's like a deadline like there was with the NFL. Like there's like, oh, you have to say by a certain day kind of thing that you're opting out. I guess I'll have to look into that. But like I said, only five like big name guys so far. I don't know about some of the littler or smaller school guys. But only 5 big name guys have opted out. So we'll see if that continues. But then also, I think it was on ESPN they were going to get into this, but it's a fair point. Like, will this become a trend? It's debatable. Honestly, it is, because I'm just like, at this point, because now the precedent is set that, like, all right, Well, these guys opted out for like COVID-related reasons. Partly, I don't know if that's the whole reason, but I mean, it's definitely a vast majority of the reason. I think a lot of this and a lot of the things that are happening with the Pac-12 and like the Big Ten, they were doing like their own United thing. Like a lot of that stuff doesn't happen without the pandemic. But at the same time, it's like these guys were pro-ready. The reason why they're opting out is because, well, Rondell Moore is the only one that's questionable for me, based on only the 1 year. But Rosu, even though he only had the 1 year, he was dominant in the most recent years, so that helps. But just these guys were all considered pro-ready, considered first-round caliber guys. And they're sitting out. So it's like, does this become a trend where guys are just like, you know what, I'm good. Again, you see it like when guys sit out bowl games, things like that, but it's like, will you see guys be like, you know what, I've had 2 good years on film, there's no reason for me to risk getting hurt, I'm good, I'll just go train. Go to class, get my degree, if you're like Rondell Moore, can get in 2.5 years, and then go train. I'm curious to see if how that goes. We won't know, obviously, until next year or from down the line, but it'll be interesting to see if this becomes a trend now where, like I said, the precedent's set, though this was pandemic reasons, but again, you're seeing guys opt out and be like, you know what, it's not worth the risk of me playing football this year. And I'm saying, will that extend? Because obviously we know football is an inherently dangerous sport, and you're always one play away from potentially a season or career-ending injury. So with that being said, it's like, will these guys be like, look, I have 2 good years, I'm basically a consensus first-round pick, why am I playing? It'll be interesting to see how that goes, and also from the NFL standpoint, it'll be interesting to see how this draft goes. I could see why the Seahawks were so willing, in my opinion, to give up a first-round pick for Jamal Adams, even though they did it both this year and next year, but a first-round pick, because it's like, who knows what this draft's going to look like? Who knows who's going to be in it? Who knows what kind of sort of college football season you're going to have? It's like, if there was ever a year to be like, I don't really think we needed that many draft picks. It might be this draft, because there might not even be a season. There's a good chance people are going off of 1 year, maybe even 2 year old tape to try to decide, like, all right, who's the best fit for our team, as opposed to, as most seasons, you're going off the most recent film of these guys. And if they got hurt or something, you go back. But now there just might not be. It's not even just that. Like, there might be a whole class of people coming in where you have to go back a year, and you got to judge their player a year ago, which is could be a good thing for some of these guys that would have. Because again, you're gonna have guys that are gonna go down this year. You're gonna have guys that go up if there's a college football season. So you can obviously hurt the guys that that worked on certain things and improved their game, because they won't be able to show it for a full season if there's not a full season. Hopefully there is, but again, not optimistic because no bubble. And again, you're seeing the schools open up, and you're seeing them be none of them been shut down or anything, but you're seeing like there hasn't been that many, but I think there's been like a couple stories of like people like having outbreaks and stuff, or people showing up to school and like the next day after the first day you found out that they were positive, and now you gotta do like a whole thing like, oh, who do they interact with, who they thought, like, it's a whole mess. And it's only going to get worse when you have thousands of kids on campus all across the country. But yeah, so then you have that aspect as well, where you're going to have guys that are going to potentially move up and improve their game, and also you have guys that are going to be lucky because they were potentially going to have a worse season than they did the year before. But now you'll never know because there's no season. So double-edged sword with that, and it'll be interesting to see how that works as well. Because if there's no season, then that obviously hurts those players on 2 fronts. Now they don't get to play, and also with draft stock could be up in the air. But then, since that being said, there's a chance that there's going to go down. And also, I didn't get to touch on this as much as I liked, so I'll touch on it a little bit in the next segment. Just even if you catch it, like, all right, you may be fine for the time being, but that doesn't mean you're going to be fine for the entirety of you might not. I mean, you're going to be fine for going forward. Like, you might still have complications or issues regarding the Rona in the future. So that's not a great thing. So you kind of want to not catch it if you don't have to catch it. So I can understand guys wanting to be safe, just to be sure, like, hey, it's not even worth it for me to possibly catch it and maybe be fine. But then again, like we saw with the Red Sox guy, you got the heart issue. Now you can't even play in a season. Again, maybe if it was a long season, he would play. But you know, if he's going to miss 60 games, like, that in and of itself should be enough to be like, all right, maybe this isn't just like if you're young and healthy, like, you'll be all right. again, we've seen young people have died from this or had lung transplants or different things. Like it attacks everyone, even though obviously the older, the higher risk or at a higher risk. But it doesn't mean young people are just going to be fine. Completely like it. Some people like to tell you. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about a whole school deciding to opt out because there's a Division I institution that will be playing no football this year voluntarily. So I thought that was interesting. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So yeah, discuss all that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Podcast Network. So the guy I wanted to talk about, but I wasn't able to in the last segment, was Xavier Thomas of Clemson University. Where are we at? Okay, here we go. Tigers coach Dabo Swinney announced Thursday night that defensive end Xavier Thomas will redshirt this year after a battle with COVID-19 and strep throat. Thomas will be eligible to play in 4 games and still redshirt, and Swinney is hopeful the junior will be able to contribute sometime this year. Thomas, a former 5-star recruit, was expected to be a starter for the Tigers this fall. We are holding him out for medical reasons, really treating him like an injury. X has probably had more on him than anybody since March. Swinney said he's just nowhere near where he needs to be to play football. Thomas was diagnosed with COVID-19 before Clemson returned to campus for workouts in June. According to Swinney, Thomas probably picked up 10 to 12 pounds during the whole quarantine thing. Thomas had strep throat later in the summer and struggled as he tried to go through workouts. Swinney added that Thomas suffering from COVID-19 and strep throat and not being able to work out put him in a bad place mentally as well. He had a hard time when he got back with just his breathing in it, and again, that's a combination of COVID, strep throat, being a little heavy. I don't know why he keeps throwing a weight in there. Because again, the weight is a byproduct of the sickness. Due to the fact that he wasn't able to work out. And I imagine if you're a guy that normally works out, and now all of a sudden you're sick and you can't work out for a while, but you're still eating, of course you're going to gain weight. It's not again, he wouldn't be overweight if he didn't get COVID. But he keeps throwing that in there. Whatever. The number one thing is for these guys to be healthy. The last thing we want to do is for X to try and go out and be half of his potential. He played a lot for them last year. Had 8 starts as a sophomore. 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks in 12 games. Was named third team All ACC. So, yeah, not exactly the biggest loss, but again, it's a guy who's eventually going to be a starter. You hope is going to improve on his first 2 years, and now we just don't know. Maybe he'll be able to contribute later, but again, it sounds like he's redshirting, so at most he'll be able to do is play 4 games. Now, when those 4 games are, who knows? But again, if you haven't played all season, you can't expect him to come back for the ACC championship or college football playoffs. Assuming that even happens. But there is that. But also, this is interesting due to the fact that, not interesting, but if you were paying attention to this stuff earlier in the summer, you knew that Clemson, during the summer, have reported that 37 players had tested positive for coronavirus since the athletic department started testing in early June. There were no hospitalizations reported. In the most recent athletic department updated Friday in late July, the school reported no active COVID-19 cases among student athletes. So there is that. this is this article was tweeted out by Matt Connolly. If you want to go at Matt at the State, if you want to look up and read the article himself. I mean, not himself, yourself. But yeah, it's interesting because like many people say, like, oh, he's young, he'll be fine. And again, defensive linemen are a little bit heavier than like the average person, even the average like football player. So maybe that hurt him a little bit. But again, as it sounds, at least from when Dad was talking, a part of the reason why he was gaining weight and wasn't able to work out the way he wanted to was because his breathing wasn't right, and that's obviously could potentially be a longer term effect of COVID. And again, the strep throat thing is like whatever, because I've had strep throat before. You like say for a couple days and like you're fine. Like I've never had trouble breathing because of strep throat. Like my throat hurts and I can't really talk, things like that. Like that sucks. But when I had strep throat, I think I had it freshman year. Oh, I think I had a freshman year of high school. And I think I had a freshman year of college. But like, I forget if I ever got officially tested for strep freshman year of college. I think I just like had a really bad situation. I found out someone I was hanging around had strep. I think she said she had strep throat. So that was a separate point. But no, freshman year I definitely had strep throat. I went to the doctor and got checked when I had like a really high fever. Even though my dad almost sent me to school, I never let him live that down. But it is what it is. But yeah. And so yeah, strep throat is never. I mean, you had a commission for a couple of days, but you're good. Like, I've never heard of someone missing the season due to complications or lingering effects of strep throat. So, like I said, this is very COVID related in my personal opinion. Because again, because it's not like he had that first, then he got strep later, and then like that hurt him. But again, if he's caught strep throat in the summer, like again, you're out for a short period of time, then you're fine. I mean, good, you missed like a day or two. I mean, when I was in freshman, I think I missed like a day or two of school, and like I was good. I mean, good in terms of like my thought I'd still get back together, but I was like fine, like I could like do things and things like that. Like it wasn't like a big issue for me. And like I'm saying, it's just one of those things where like, all right, people catch it, and like even now as NFL players or like college players or your MLB guys, they're catching it, and like, all right, no one's going to hospitals, no one's had like a really serious case that has been documented so far, even though you don't want to test, you don't want to attempt it. It doesn't mean they're not going to have some effects. Like we talked about with Von Miller, he said he almost opted out because he was afraid of that. Apparently, the Broncos, whatever they are doing for protection against COVID, he appreciated and he was cool with. But again, he almost opted out. We saw Gobert. Like he said, he was like, I think it was like he didn't, like his sense of taste, sense of smell, things like that were gone for months. Like I said, we talked about the Red Sox guy. So, I think it's important to remind people, in general, the average person isn't always going to be fine. Especially when you're talking about athletes. Everyone thinks like, oh, these athletes, like, and even if like, oh, if they catch it early, like they'll be good. Like at least they caught it now instead of catching it in like during the season, things like that. Maybe it's better to catch it now. But there's also been no indication that you can't catch it again, because there have been people. There's been documented cases of people catching it twice, and the second time being worse. Because I guess I was reading up on some antibody stuff, and I know like there are some cases like if you don't, which I imagine is for a lot of asymptomatic people, which would make a lot of sense. Like I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to get too detailed into this, but I imagine if there's a disease that you're supposed to help fight off, you're supposed to help develop antibodies for. If you don't have any symptoms for it, your body doesn't know to fight it off. Like if your body just feels fine. Like, why would it develop any sort of barrier or any sort of things to help fight off the disease? That doesn't know exists because your body feels fine. That's why, again, when you get like flu shots or vaccines, they give you a little bit of the virus, of whatever it is, so that your body can fight it off. That makes sense. But again, if your body doesn't know it has something to fight off, then like why would you develop antibodies? Which is why I think people can get it more than once, because it's like if you don't get it with symptoms, and even some cases they say antibodies could go away after a couple months, which is a disaster in and of itself. But yeah, if you don't develop any symptoms, like why would you not be immune to getting it again? Because your body doesn't know to fight it off. It didn't know to fight it off the first time because you had it, but like you felt fine. So that's what I'm saying. The whole like, oh, they catch it early, or like, oh, they'll be fine thing. Maybe they'll be fine the first time. But maybe not. But also the second time, there's a chance they could get it again, and like that's just as bad. So, yeah, and I like to try to use these examples to remind people how serious the disease is, even if you don't lose your life. There's still, like I said, there's still things that happen to you. We still don't really know the long-term effects because it's a new disease. Like, years from now, we can see a lot of people that had the virus and had it bad, or even had mild cases, suffer from something else, or are susceptible to something else years later, just because they had it. Like, again, you don't know, so that's why I'm saying, just like, try not to get it, or don't like be like, oh, I hope they get it now. So like, no, just hope everybody stays safe. Point blank, period. That's where I'm at with it. Just hope everybody stays safe. And people are going to get it because we don't have it under control, obviously. But again, don't be like, oh yeah, it's fine. They caught it now. Like, oh, they'll be fine. They're not like, not sure about that one. But yeah, so I mean, look, the whole, it's not hysteria, but the whole concern involving COVID caused an FBS team to shut down their football operations for the entire year. Uconn, this was from, I think this was from Wednesday. Yeah, Uconn has now become the first FBS team to cancel football season because of the coronavirus. Uconn, which last month officially left the American Athletic Conference, announced Wednesday that it's suspending its football program for the 2020 season because of the coronavirus pandemic. Uconn, which went 2-10 in its final season in the ACC, they weren't exactly the best team. The first FBS program to suspend its football team because of the pandemic. The Huskies were expected to play an independent schedule this year, and obviously that's just not going to happen. After receiving guidance from the state and public health officials and consulting with football student athletes, we decided that we will not compete on the gridiron this season. Uconn Athletic Director David Benedict said in a news release, the safety challenges created by COVID-19 place our football student athletes at an unacceptable level of risk. That's what I've been saying. Glad somebody else sees it. Husky coach Randy Edsel said he consulted with players before the university made a decision. We engaged and listened to the concerns of our football student athletes and feel this is the best decision for their health, safety, and well-being. As was said in the news release, our team is united in this approach, and we will use this time to further play up development within the program and gear ourselves towards the 2021 season. Our university said members of the football team will remain enrolled in class, either virtually or in person, and would have access to facilities and support services to ensure they remain on track academically. Uconn officials said no student athletes have tested positive for the coronavirus since early July. So again, you could read the whole article. This was from ESPN. If you want to go more, like I said, you want to read into more detail about it. But again, that shows how bad it is, or how bad it could be. Is that an entire program just like, you know what, we're good. And again, everyone's going to say like, oh, they weren't that good. Oh, they were playing in the schedule. Not false. None of that is untrue. But that's still like a big deal. A football program, especially, I mean, UConn's definitely more of a basketball school, so we'll see what happens in basketball season. But, I mean, football and basketball are the two things that make a lot of schools a lot of money. So they're just like willingly just being like, you know what, whatever money we could get for the season to try to like configure a game or like join a conference like Notre Dame did for the season, like it's just not worth the risk. And I found that interesting because that's not something you see from a top down. The reason why we're kind of in this situation as a country is that from the top down we haven't had uniform. We haven't been uniform in our decision making, our ideals and things work. Everything's divisive. Everything's this side or that side agrees different things. It's like everything has to turn into an issue, no matter what it is, and that's kind of why we're stuck there. Is because now everyone's like either you're this way, or you're that way, and it's just like it shouldn't be that way. Now when it comes to health, it should be just like, all right, listen to the doctors, listen to scientists, and do what they tell you. And again, a lot of people say like, oh, the CDC said you shouldn't wear masks in March. True, I think part of that was because they wanted health professionals to get them first, and you didn't want everyone just, as we saw with like the toilet paper and stuff when the pandemic started, everyone just buying up random things. You just didn't want that to happen, so it was a shortage for the people that definitely need them. But now there's not a shortage as much. They're telling everyone to wear masks because that's what a lot of countries did that were able to quell this thing relatively easily. Again, that's not the only thing they did, among other things. But a lot of it's just like uniform mask mandates. And that's not what we're doing. So I thought that was interesting, and obviously we're seeing with the Pac-12 and Big Ten, student athletes are very much on top of the risk that they're putting themselves in to play this season. And they're like, look, if these certain standards aren't met, we're not doing it. And so I like that they were able to consult with the players before they made the decision to be like, oh, what do you guys think? Because they could have easily been like, all the players could be like, nah, we want to play. Like, don't do this. Then they could have figured something out. But I guess the players were just like, you know what? This isn't worth the risk. And again, shout out to the players because that's not something you would have seen a lot of guys do. Even this time last year, if something like this had come up, you wouldn't see these guys be willing to be like, you know what? I'm gonna sit out a whole season. Like it's not worth my time. So I found that to be interesting. And hey, see if any. I don't think anybody else will do it. And again, UConn, it's UConn, so it's not Alabama, it's not Clemson, anything like that. Those schools can't afford. I thought I saw like something, like an article or a tweet or something about how like Wisconsin was standing to lose like $100 million or something if like there was no football season this year. Like it's a lot of schools just don't want to take the risk of losing out on all the money, which is why you're having these conference schedules before the Rona potentially shuts it down. Because again, if you got to postpone or cancel 1 or 2 games, it's going to be a mess. Because I don't know how you're going to make them up. You can't do double headers. But hopefully they're thinking of that now because it's going to happen. That's all the MLB. Like they were like, oh, we might be all right. Like no, things are going to go bad. Things are going to go wrong. You need to have a plan in place for when that does happen. So hopefully the NCAA is taking this time to put those plans in place. So I thought those 2 things were interesting. I want to discuss those with you guys. I'm speaking of interesting things or comments. Doug Pederson had comments, not about the corona, but about roster makeup and the type of guys who will be able to benefit from a situation like this. In terms of, I originally had thought that this wouldn't help these types of players, but he has a different opinion. So I wanted to read about that and like discuss it with you guys, his opinion, and if I agree with it, disagree with it, stuff like that. Because again, though I didn't originally agree, I'm more than welcome to change my opinion, or more than willing to change my opinion if presented with new information that makes sense. So we'll see if this makes sense to me, but we'll discuss it, and you can see if it makes sense to you. So yeah, we'll talk about it right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, Doug EP, good old Doug Pederson. Hopefully he's feeling better and still doing well because then you know he's positive for the coronavirus. So, apparently he was asymptomatic. He wasn't really feeling too bad, but hopefully that continues. Hopefully he'll eventually be able to get back with the team whenever that is. Don't need to rush it. And also, hopefully, he's able to stay clear of it again, because as we talked about, just because you got it once doesn't necessarily mean you're immune. Especially if you were asymptomatic, it sounds like a lot of the cases of people getting it the second time and getting it worse were when they had it. They didn't have it that bad the first time, and like usually the second time, if you did have it bad or even like moderately, it's not as bad the second time. But again, you don't want to get a period, point blank. So hopefully he can avoid doing that, and other players on the Eagles. I know they got a couple, Lane Johnson, Nathan Gary, and I think Jordan Mailata, and most of you guys don't know who the second two are. And I don't blame you. One's a backup tackle. That used to be a rugby player, and the other guy's, in my opinion, one of the worst linebackers in the league. So, don't judge. But Lane Johnson, most people know, he's one of the better right tackles, one of the better tackles overall in the league. And obviously, he was saying for the dog mask with Chris Long, the Patriots comments about having fun, things like that. So a lot of people know who Lane Johnson is. So hopefully, they're all feeling better. But yeah, Doug Pederson, this is from NBC Sports, you can find on Yahoo, a couple different places. Doug Pederson, who notably made it to the NFL as an undrafted rookie out of Northeast Louisiana, and was able to spend a decade, more than a decade, in the league as a backup quarterback. He had a vote of confidence for undrafted guys, or late round guys, heading into the draft. Especially seeing as, and this is probably going to be surprising. It was surprising to me when I saw the counts. It was surprising, I imagine, to some of you guys as well out there, because you have less guys coming in training camp. You don't have as much time to work. You're trying to not only get people ready to compete, or just even get them up to speed on just the team and like the philosophies and the principles that you want to install on both offense and defense. You also got to get people ready for a season, because with no preseason games, you kind of you're gonna have to do everything through training camp game wise to prepare before you hit the field and take on somebody for real. But again, with that, you're not getting right on the pad. They don't mean training camp, you get the pads on right away. These guys, they're doing the whole strength and conditioning period. They're doing the period without helmets. Like, they're not, most teams aren't putting the pads on until like mid-August. So you got a while in between now and then. I guess about a week between now and then, since, again, a lot of these guys started showing up last week or even before that, to start getting tested and stuff, so they can get in the building and start training and do those different things. So you got ways to go to work on that. But he said that, I think it is actually a good time to be a late round draft pick and possibly a free agent. Even these young draft picks, Pederson said via the Daily Times, we've already had a week with them practicing on the grass. We were going to get some really good opportunities here in these next coming weeks. They are going to learn a lot from the veterans. The way I have the schedule set up is for them to learn and to be successful. Once we get into the padded portion of training camp is where we really get to see where these guys are. You truly feel these young guys are going to be the ones who are going to help, or have to help us throughout the entire season. The Eagles roster currently has 13 undrafted guys, and rookies, that is. Most of them will obviously get cut, but Pederson wants them to know they have a real opportunity in Philadelphia. And like I said, he's maybe a little bit biased towards those guys, because he was one of those guys coming out of the NFL, and he was able to carve out a niche for himself as a backup on a couple different teams. He backed up Brett Favre, was a backup with the Eagles before he obviously became a coach. Not just like the head coach, but assistant coach, quarterback coach, different things like that, offensive coordinator. So again, he's worked his way up in the league. But I thought that was interesting because, like I said, you would think now, during this time, would be a rough time for these young guys, because they don't have as much time. Like, all right, during the spring, you can kind of start to flash some things. Like, so you get people's interest. And then when training camp comes around, you maybe get more opportunities, you get more eyes on you, different things, more ability to showcase yourself to the coaches. And then, obviously, during normal preseason, to other coaches and other staff, just because if you get cut, then maybe they could pick you up, kind of thing. But now you don't have that. So that's why I was like, this seems like it'd be an awful time to be, because you don't have the opportunities. You're going to be trying to get the guys that you think are going to be out there week one, getting them most of the reps and get them as ready as possible, because you don't win no games and stuff. You gotta speed up the whole process. But, like I said, according to Doug, that's not going to be the case. And I think that is interesting, just because I wonder, well, one, if other coaches feel that way. But also, two, I'm curious to see why he feels that his schedule sets them up for success. And I understand the aspect of they were able to get in earlier, like rookies, like the quarterbacks and things like that, were able to get in before most of the veterans. So they've had time once they got through their, I think they had to get 4 negative tests or something like that before you could enter into the building. Whatever the standard they need to meet was, they're able to go through that and then work there. So they're getting early coaching before that. But again, once the veterans show up, you gotta get them up to speed too. You can't just focus only on the young guys, only on the rookies, because those guys aren't going to, in theory, be the starters come week one. But on the flip side of that, I would think the reason why he could be saying something like that is because I imagine most teams and most organizations kind of realize that injuries are going to happen. I mean, granted, you're not going to have a Patriots situation where you have a bunch of guys opt out because now the opt-out is done. Well, I mean, because you say that, but then I'm like technically the opt-out was done for baseball too, but then Lorenzo Cain opted out, so it's one of those, I don't know how it would go if, like, say there was an outbreak or something during the season, players would decide they wanted to opt out. I don't know how that would work. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But my point was that now you're going to have, like I said, you're going to have a lot of injuries potentially. You're going to have people testing positive, missing games, stuff like that. So you're going to need to have those guys ready as well, because they're going to need to potentially step in on a moment's notice to fulfill some of these spots. And it's like, again, no one's going to pity you, or no one's going to be like, oh, what was the Eagles, what was the Giants, what was the Patriots, what was the Packers, whoever, if they have to start a bunch of undrafted guys, because everyone's in the same situation, everyone's in the same boat. Again, a lot of injuries and stuff like this are going to be based solely on luck, and then also taking your own precautions, as we saw in the MLB. Some of the teams were a little less cautious than they should have been, and then that's how you end up with the situations that you end up with. Though, like I said, it's not just the people that are out and about doing things that get the Rona. People that are doing everything right, and then just like one time they get caught out there by someone that isn't doing something right, now they catch it. So again, it's not just the reckless people. It can, like I said, it can hit anybody. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's just like that part of it. That's what he means, and that's what he's thinking of. Is a fair point, because you're going to have these guys be ready to contribute, because you don't know if and when somebody's going to have to step in. But you don't know if this guy's going to get hurt during training camp. You don't know if that guy's going to get hurt during training camp. You don't know what's going to happen once these games start up, because even in the NBA, and in most leagues, like even the NBA, there hasn't been like that many serious injuries up until this point, which is definitely, obviously, that's what you want. I'm not wishing for that. But there hasn't been too many, which is good. But football is different. There's like very rarely do you hear about serious season-ending injuries in like preseason or like the training camp, stuff like that in basketball. Like it doesn't happen as often. Not that it never happens, but it doesn't happen that often. Every year in football, you got guys going down, you got guys tearing ACLs, tearing Achilles, different things like that. Now, the level of how important they are to your team is going to vary. But that kind of thing is very synonymous with the preseason. And obviously those things happen in the games, which we won't have happen. So that's the good sign, is that at least, or the good things, that at least in theory, the guys that are getting hurt will be getting hurt in real games once you get past training camp, which, I mean, if I'm going to get hurt, or you're going to have a guy get hurt, at least let it be in a game that matters as opposed to a preseason game where you're just like out there just to be out there. That'd be a disaster, personally. But yeah, so when you look at it like from that perspective, it's like, all right, maybe I can see what he's thinking. And also, from them, for the Eagles, like they've gotten key contributions, especially last year, out of lower round guys, out of undrafted guys, out of free agents, out of guys they've signed off the street, guys they've taken off other teams' practice squads, things like that. They did that at receiver with Greg Ward, Deontay, Burnett, Robert Davis, who they brought in. I think that those were like the main three, because they had JJ, but he was already there. So yeah, you had those guys. You've had late round picks like Big V. He was a 5th round guy, I believe. He was a starter for them in the Super Bowl. Like they've gotten Matt Pryor, who was a 5th or 6th round pick, somewhere right there, had to start for them in a playoff game. Jalen Mills, who's on his second, I guess he was only on a 1-year deal, but he's on a second contract with the Eagles. He was a 7th round pick, and he's been a on and off starter when he's not hurt. He's been starting for 4 seasons now. Who was Josh Perkins, another guy who's a low round draft pick, undrafted type of guy who's been a key contributor who was a key contributor for the team last season. Nathan Gary, as I mentioned, I don't think he's a good linebacker, but he plays a lot for them because the coaches like him, so that's at least a plus. If someone's going to like you, rather it be the coaches than the fans, because the coaches are the ones that make the playing time decisions. So he's been out there. He was I think a late, like a 6th-ish, 7th-ish round pick. You've had an undrafted free agency. You've had Corey Clement, running back. I mean, running back's the easiest position to do these type of things, but Corey Clement was big for them as an undrafted rookie, especially in the Super Bowl. Had over 100 yards receiving, if I remember correctly. Josh Adams the year after was big for them. Very, very useful for them in their little playoff push they had towards the end of 2018. Even last year, Boston Scott, a guy who took off a practice squad from the Saints, who wasn't drafted that high. So they've gotten key contributions, and every team does. And I think that's the thing is that, like, all right, you think, like, man, it's going to be a bad time to be them because they don't have the time to work the way they would. But because of opt-outs, whether it's, like, again, whether it's opt-outs, injuries, whatever, these guys may be more vital than they've ever been in a given season. Because, again, there's so much uncertainty. There's going to be guys missing games due to the Rona, potentially. You have to have guys step in that maybe, in theory, wouldn't be in that position. These guys got to be on top of their game maybe sooner than they normally would have to be. Again, every team has late-round guys or undrafted guys, the rookies that are signed that end up being contributors for them. But this year, and especially, I feel like that could be more vital than another year, just because due to, like I said, the injuries and testing positive, things like that, you're going to have people step in in a moment's notice, and some of those may be those younger guys. So again, we'll have to see how training camp goes and how many of them even end up making a lot of these rosters. But in general, teams are made up of mainly 4th through 7th and undrafted round picks. Again, for the day 3 of the draft is when a majority of the rounds are, and that's when undrafted free agents are signed. So that's where a majority of your team is built. And your team's not going to be built all on first round, second round picks. It's impossible. You only get but so many of those. Like, very few teams have 2 firsts or 2 seconds kind of thing, but you might have like 2 fourths or 2 fifths due to the compensatory picks, things like that. You sign like up to 10 undrafted guys. I think they have 13. The article said so, or maybe it's even more. And also the practice squad's extended this year. So again, it's another reason that these guys are going to be vital because they're going to have more of them around in case of something like, I don't know, not just in case of something like this, but in case of something like this where people get hurt, people gotta miss a game due to the Rona, different things like that. You're gonna have to have people step in. So I get his point. While I still believe that it's going to be rough because they don't have as much time as they could to showcase themselves. Like I know there's a couple of undrafted guys that I'm looking forward to watching. Even speaking of another undrafted guy, T.J. Edwards, undrafted linebacker out of Wisconsin, he could be a starter for them this year. He was decent for them last year when he got playing time. So, yeah. But there's a couple guys I'm interested in watching. But again, normally I'd be able to watch them in the spring and then kind of come back and see what's going on in training camp, things like that. But now all we're getting is training camp. So you don't have as much time to showcase your skills. But you can still use this time wisely, especially use the early time. Because again, they're getting on the field before most of the vets are. So you got to use that time wisely. So you can kind of begin to separate yourself, even if just from your peers. You want to be able to separate yourself. So then when the veterans come in, like, all right, you may not be at the front of the line, but you may be second instead of being like third or something like that. You get the point. Instead of running with the 3s or the 4s, you're running with the 2s. Now, again, that's a step closer to being on the 1s. That means you're at better chance of making the roster. Things like that. So, again, it'll be interesting to see how many of these undrafted and late-round guys are able to make teams and contribute this year in a season where it's going to be anything but normal. So yeah, should be interesting to keep track of. But yeah, it was an interesting point of view Doug brought to the discussion. So yeah, after this last break, we're going to come back and we're going to discuss, obviously with about 3 or 4 bubble games in now, and kind of get an idea of who's playing well, who's looking a little shaky, things like that. So I think there's a couple of teams, obviously mainly in the West, excuse me. But there's a couple of teams who, and this isn't that much different than it was earlier. Like you could have said these same things pre-restart, but now that we've seen some games, it's definitely true. And I think there's a few teams that if I'm a higher seeded team out west, I don't want to run into these teams any earlier than I have to. So I'll give my list in order of the teams that am fearful of. If I'm like the Lakers, if I'm the Clippers, if I'm even the Nuggets, if I'm like, you know what, let's try not to play these guys if we don't have to, and let them knock each other out or let somebody else knock them out. So yeah. We'll talk about those teams and why I feel that way right after the break. So stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, like I said, teams mainly out west that I think are going to be teams that teams should be afraid of. Said teams a lot. But you guys get the point. These are just different teams that I feel as if I were, like, say if I'm the Lakers, or I'm the Clippers, or like I said, the Nuggets. Some teams that I'm like, you know what, let's try to avoid playing these guys for as long as possible. So we're going to do these in order, at least in my order. And the number one team, or should I guess, we'll do it reverse. We'll go three. The third team, and this is a team I talked about a little bit, even heading in, that I thought teams should be afraid of, and then, like I said, seeing it now, that my confidence in them, in terms of, again, they might not win a series, they might not make it to the conference finals, they're probably not going to make it to the finals, but this team's going to give somebody a very tough first round series, and may even upset them, if you want to call it that. And that first team, or the third team that I'd be afraid of, is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And, again, this isn't, like, that surprising if you've been paying attention. They've been playing well. I think they're one of the best teams since, like, Thanksgiving. They've been great. I think they were showing a graphic. I forget if it was from December or January or whatever, but they're a top 5 team in terms of record over, like, the last, like, 30, 40 games, something like that. So, I mean, they got to the rough start. I think they started, like, 11-14, something around there. But, like, since then, they've been, again, one of the best teams in the league, and a lot of it stems from that 3-guard lineup, the Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander lineup. But they've been without Dennis Schroeder for the restart because he left on Monday for the birth of his child, and he'll be back at some point, who knows when, doesn't really matter, per se. Again, you want to get him back so you can go through the quarantining process and things like that, and eventually be able to play for the Thunder again a couple of games before he just hops back in the postseason. But he did go through all the preseason, like, training stuff, so he should be all right. And I imagine he's going through the daily testing, where he's getting tested every day, so he doesn't have to go through the 10-day quarantine like Lou Will did. So he'll only miss, like, a couple of games. But even without him, they've been looking good. Again, they handedly beat the Lakers on Wednesday, was it? Like I said, all the days kind of run together. Yes, it was Wednesday. Beat them by 19. Again, in a game where the Lakers, you would say how hard they were trying. And some people would just say they were missing shots. But, like, they played a lot of their starters. It's not like they were playing anybody. They beat the Jazz handedly as well. They won all their scrimmage games, which, again, those don't really count. But since they've been in the bubble, they've been focused. And then even the game that they lost so far, which was to the Nuggets, they lost in overtime. And if Chris Paul just makes the first free throw, then they have the 1-point lead. And then, again, they were able to defend the last-second shot. So, again, maybe they would have run a different play if they were down 1 as opposed to being tied, where they knew if a miss couldn't hurt them. But, again, if the defense still locks up the way it did on that possession, then now they're undefeated in the bubble. Heading into Friday when they play the Grizzlies, which, again, they should beat. But, hey, we've seen weird things happen in the bubble. And the schedule isn't really that bad. They play the Grizzlies and Wizards coming up. Those could be 2 wins. The Wizards one should be a win. But the Grizzlies, you never know. They're going to get desperate at some point. Then they play the Suns, who were playing well. So that's not going to be an easy one. The Heat, again, they're another team that's going to play hard. They're kind of interesting matchup for the Thunder just because they have they shoot the ball really well. So if they're on and their Thunder defense is not on, that's going to be a rough one. And then they play the Clippers in the last game, but we'll see if anybody's even playing. And if seeds are decided by then, it's not really going to matter, especially for the Clippers. They might be resting guys, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, this is just a team that, again, they just play really well, and I think that's the good thing with them is that they don't have one guy. Again, Chris Paul's the guy who can pick a guy, which is why some people have him in their MVP, like in their MVP shortlist, which he should be, because this is a team that many people, myself included, even as a fan, assume they're going to be a lottery team. They're like, all right, this team's not going to be that good. Here's what it is. Just like, hey, you want to see some growth out of Shea. You want to see Darius Bazley kind of improve. Maybe be able to trade something. Well, not improve, but again, he hadn't played basketball in a year, at least organized-wise. You want to see hope for his growth throughout the season. And you hope, like, oh, maybe we'll be able to trade Gallo at the trade deadline, or maybe trade Chris Paul at some point. And then they started playing really well. And it's like, oh, okay, this is working. And it's working really well. And like I said, because, I mean, again, Chris Paul's the main guy, and he's been their best guy in the clutch, which is why they've been so good, is because he's been so good, even though he did miss the free throw the other night. They don't have, like, one dominant guy. Like, most teams, like, most of the elite teams, like, all right, you gotta worry about, I guess the Clippers probably get the most, where you gotta worry about, like, Kawhi and PG, and then Lou Will off the bench, and Montrez off the bench. With the Lakers, it's just like you gotta worry about LeBron and AD, and just hope you don't get one of those random Kuzma games that, like, he's, like, really good in. Let's see what else. The Nuggets, again, is mainly just Jokic, and maybe a little Jamal Murray, but now that Michael Porter Jr. is playing well, as we pointed to was a possibility, even though my Lonzo one's looking a little shaky. And Karras is kind of, it's hard to say because he's been in and out of the lineup. But the Michael Porter Jr. one's looking spot on, where, like, this is a guy, given the extra playing time, especially with a lot of the Nuggets guys being hurt, he could kind of capitalize. And he has so far. He's been great. Even though they lost today, he was still good. He's been, like I said, very efficient and shooting the ball really well. And that's just kind of what they need. They needed somebody to add an offensive punch. And he looks like he could be that for the Nuggets, not just this year in the playoffs and in this restart, but also going forward, being a guy that could be a perennial 20-point, maybe even 25-point per game scorer on a nightly basis. And again, take some of the load and things off of Jokic, where he didn't have to feel like he has to do everything offensively for them in order to get the team to go. But then I was talking about the Rockets, it's mainly just Russ and Harden, and then, like, you just try to defend the other guys, hope they miss their threes that day. I'm trying to think who else. Jazz, it's Mitchell, and then force somebody else to beat you. And like I said, even on the East, with the Bucks, it's Middleton and Giannis, and just, all right, if Brook Lopez beats us, is what it is. Raptors are another team that are a little bit more balanced, so that's why they're so good. The Heat are a little bit, because they got Jimmy, but then you got Bam could be good, you got Duncan Robinson can hit threes, Tyler Hero can hit threes, Kendrick Nunn can hit threes. Got a bunch of different guys that could be good, and same thing with the Celtics, where they got Jason Tatum, who's their best, but then you got Brown, you got Tatum, you got Hayward, you got a couple different guys. Even Cantor can give you a random, like, 20-15 type of game if you need it. So yeah, that's the same thing. That's a good thing with the Thunder. That was my point. That, all right, they have Chris Paul, but then they have Shea. They can get you 20 on any given night. You got Danilo Gallinari. They can get you 20 on any given night. You got Steven Adams. If he gets the right matchup, he can get you 20. Dennis Schroeder off the bench, he can get you 20. And on top of the fact that they're very diverse and multiple on offense, they're very diverse and multiple on defense. You got a bunch of guys that are young, especially coming off the bench. You got Schroeder, who's young, athletic, and is going to give effort. He's not the greatest defender, but he's going to give effort. He's going to at least try. You got Hamidou Diallo, again, very athletic guy, long arms, good speed, good footwork, things like that. He can be a pest on defense if he wants to. Bazley's working through it. He's young, skinny, but again, he's long arms, long body. He was doing a decent job on LeBron the other day. Nerlens Noel off the bench can block some shots. Again, is a good backup center to have for a team. And then the starters, you got Dort, who's turned himself into, after being, I'm pretty sure he went undrafted, he turned himself into a starter once he was able to work through his 2-way contract. And again, he was the guy on LeBron to start the game. Did it always go well? No. But again, he's not afraid. He's a big, not a tall guy, but he's long arms, strong. And even like Shea is going to give effort. Chris Paul is going to give effort. Adams is a very good defensive center. And then Gallo is Gallo, but he's not going to be a net negative necessarily most games. So again, you got different types of styles they can play on a given night, and that's going to be why they're going to be tough. And the biggest thing, like we talked about, is they're not going to crumble under pressure. You see where, like the Mavericks we talked about, where they have a great offense, but then when it gets tight at the end of the games, the offense starts to struggle a little bit. Like that doesn't happen with the Thunder, other than like it did happen in the Nuggets game. They just couldn't hit shots, especially in overtime. But generally speaking, they're great in the clutch. Then they have 3 guys that can handle the ball, in Shea, Chris Paul, and Dennis. And then you got another guy, Gallo, who can get his own shot if you need it. And then you got Adams down there to play good defense, get some rebounds, set screens, things like that. So you have, not that many teams have that, where you're going to have 3 or 4 different guys that if you need it, they can get their own shot. On the closing line, that's not something a lot of teams have. Like at best, maybe you have 3. Most teams probably have 2. Where you can like realistically be like, all right, shot clock's winding down, it's 8 seconds, go do something. And Chris Paul can do it, Shea can do it, Schroeder can do it, and Gallo can do it if need be. And I said that makes them diverse, and then they play good defense. They play sound defense on the other end. So it's important, like I said, you can go small, add in Dort, add in like, I forget, you mentioned Robertson, and since he's back now, there's another guy you can throw in there defensively. And if he's going to be confident hitting the threes like he was in the scrimmages, that's going to be beneficial. I went on for them for too long for being the 3. But you get the point. Like again, they're going to be a tough out for somebody. I think maybe even the Jazz or even the Nuggets, the team that they could upset. The Rockets is going to be a shaky one. Those kind of guys. But even if you get like, you can get them in the second round if you're like the Lakers or something. That's not going to be a series you should win, but it's not going to be an easy series. And then you got to go on and face the Clippers or the Nuggets potentially. So you're going to be worn down by the time you get to them. As I said, in that same vein, the Rockets are my number 2 in terms of just like you've seen. And that was the thing I talked about with them earlier, is that they can play different ways. Even tonight where, all right, they didn't have Russ and the Lakers didn't have LeBron, but still dominated. They won this game. They won 13-97. And the greatest thing about it is that Harden has been good and efficient. Because normally, all right, he's going to shoot, he's going to score a lot of points, but it might be on 20, 25 attempts, a lot of free throws, things like that. Like now, it's not happening as much. He had 39 points today, 12 from the line, so still getting his free throws. But had 5 threes, 11 or 19 from the field. Like it's not one of those like 25, 27 shot games that it takes him to get 40, where a lot of it's free throws and a couple threes here or there. Like no, he's doing it efficiently. And like I said, it's not just this game. It's been throughout the restart he's been good. Against, he wasn't that good against the Bucks. But against the Mavericks, he shot 70% from the field, 33% from 3, 85% from the free throw line, 49 points. In the last game against the Blazers, he had 23, 48% from the field, 37% from 3, 86% from the line. And he's doing it again 8, 9, had 12 assists today. So again, he's been a guy that's been efficient. And then even Russ has been, he's been good since just like January for them. But he didn't even play tonight and they didn't even need him. But it worked out for them. And then you just need enough from your other guys. Like Ben McLemore today had 20 points. Daniel House had 14. Jeff Green had 15 off the bench. He's been good for them in the restart. So you just need enough from the other guys to supplement Russ and Harden, and you're going to do good. And then, again, even Covington, who has been up and down in the restart, but he just plays good defense, and that's all you need. It was a plus 29 today. PJ Tucker, another guy. Would it be nice for him to hit his threes? Yes, but if he doesn't, hey, it is what it is. You're just going to need good defense out of him. Like I said, McLemore was in the starting lineup today, but he's a guy that can come off the bench and get you some buckets if you need him, if his shot's going down. Same thing with like a Jeff Green. They can do it. And even Austin Rivers, he's played in a lot of games. Like, he's not always on, but if he's on, he can get you 15, 20 points off the bench in a pinch if your offense is a little slow that day. So like I said, they can go high scoring, they can go fast paced, they can also go grind it out, slow it down, need be, defensive type of matchup. They can do both. And this seemed like the perfect setting for them where like there's no crowd involved, they're the team that spreads you out, let their guys attack, drive, kick, hit threes or drive, and if it's hard and isolate, drive, maybe get to the rim, drive, step back, drive, draw foul, rust, either drive all the way to the rim or drive for the nice little pull-up that he's got. So yeah, they can do a bunch of different things. And again, the thing is they're going to have to figure out how they're going to deal with size for a whole series. Again, they've been good in one-off games here and there, but for a whole series, having no real center, that could prove to be an issue. So we'll see how that goes depending on who their first-round matchup is. But again, their team, the best case scenario for these top teams is for the Thunder and Rockets to get to 4 and 5. So now they have to knock each other out before they even get to you. So whoever comes out of that, all right, you're probably going to be a little banged and bruised up. And now we only got to worry about facing one of you potentially, as opposed to now we might have to go through you and this other team. Like if the Rockets at the 5 and the Thunder got the 6. Now if you're the Lakers, I mean, I don't think the Thunder are going to make it to the conference finals. But now if you're the Lakers, you might have to face the Rockets in round 2, and either the Clippers or like the Thunder in round 3 kind of thing. You don't want to have to go through all of that. You want to. Again, obviously, you play whoever's in front of you. If you're the 1 seed, you're not that worried about anybody. But again, at the same time, that doesn't mean there aren't teams that are going to scare you a little bit. And I think those two teams are definitely going to scare you. And if you're the number 1 team, easily, I think the Lakers, if they don't get it together soon, they should be very afraid. And that's the Blazers. As I said before, them being healthy was going to be important for them. And also, going back to the health thing, Harden is a guy that a lot of times he's been like worn down. He's been a little out of shape or whatever people say. And he's kind of like had some subpar, well, definitely had some subpar playoff performances. But now he had 4 months off. He's in better shape. His hair looks a little rough, but every other part of his game looks good. And it seems like he seems like he's got legs under him. Everything's looking good. He's not going to be as tired. Again, he's going to play a lot of minutes. That's just what D'Antoni does. But he's not going to be at the mercy of being like, oh, he's worn down. He's beat up from having to carry the team offensively all year. That's not something he's had to do this year. And also, again, he had the 4 months off. So that's going to be to his benefit come playoff time. So now you don't got the tired Harden. You got the well-rested Harden. And that could be a problem for teams come playoff time. So speaking of injuries, going back to Blazers being the number 1, that was a big thing for them, is like getting Nurkic back, getting Collins back, because they're really their only size before them for most of the season was just Whiteside. That was really all they had from a size standpoint. It was just, like you said, it was just him. Then they were going to have to try to figure it out from there offensively. Or, I mean, well, not offensively, from a size standpoint. But now, again, like I said, having Collins back, having Nurkic back, that allows Whiteside to go to the bench. And now he can be, instead of being your starter, which isn't, I mean, he was fine as a starter, but he can now be your third big coming off. Still playing good minutes, still doing what he needs to do. He was averaging 15 points. Did not realize that. 15 and 14 rebounds almost will go along with 3 blocks. So now you're getting that kind of play potentially off your bench. And Nurkic in these restarts has been great. 22 and 11 with 3 blocks as well. So I mean he's been dominant. Zach Collins hasn't been the same. He's only averaging, well, he played a couple more games, but he's only averaging for the season 8 points, 6 rebounds. So yeah, that's an issue that's going to need to correct. But I mean, hey, when you have Melo playing well, at least especially in the restart, shooting, like I said, shooting 38% from 3 on the year, and he's continuing to do that again. He's had great games, he's had good games, he's had subpar games, but in the games where they needed him to make shots late, he's been there to do it. And also, again, as long as Gary Trent Jr. is going to be the second coming of like Klay Thompson, hey, we're going to ride that hot hand. And so we'll see if that's able to continue once the playoffs start, because that'll be big for him. But then you got to go with Dame and CJ. And this is a team that without Nurkic last year, then Cantor was in instead of Whiteside, made it to the Western Conference Finals. And they were up on the Warriors in every one of those games, and they could have easily won that series if they were just able to hold a lead. So this is not, again, this isn't some slouch. This isn't like, again, the record may fool you, their placement standing may fool you, but this is a solid team when healthy. Like, this is a team that would have been, this team was the way it was constructed, and if Melo had played this well, even though who knows if he would have been on the team, if Collins and Nurkic had been healthy for the entire year. But if Melo was on there and still playing well, this team easily makes the playoffs. Easily. Like, again, like, you probably got the Mavericks as the 8 seed, as opposed to the Grizzlies now. Because the Blazers are, 6 games under 500, 32-38 now officially. And they've gotten 4 games total out of Nurkic. And in those 4 games, they're 3-1. So yeah, just one of those things where, like, if they had this all season, they would be, like, they wouldn't have been needed to do a play-in because the 8 teams would have been secure. In my opinion. I say this is a team, like I said, they got size, they got good guard play, and that's going to be a bad thing for the Lakers because with no Avery Bradley, I guess you got Danny Green, who's not a bad defender, but I don't know if he's been like locked down this year. And also, if his 3-point shot's not working, then like he's just out there running suicides basically. So you got to put somebody else in, and then that worsens your defense. And Kuzma's been good defensively. Caruso's been good defensively in the bubble. Hope that can continue in the playoffs because obviously, I mean, even though there's no crowds, going to be heightened level of intensity. But again, you got guys as we talked about, guys in Dame and in CJ that can make tough shots, which is what you need to do in the playoffs. You can't just rely on the open shots because sometimes those aren't going to fall. You're going to need guys that late in the shot clock, late in games, with good defense on them. You're going to need them to be able to hit shots every now and again, and that's what Dame and CJ can do. Obviously, famously for Dame, because he's had some game winners to end series that were well contested. So and then also he can shoot from like 30. It's like you know what Dame can do. CJ is a similar thing. Again, he's not as wow as Dame as some of the shots and things like that, but he's another guy that again can hit tough shots when you need him. And then if you couple that with the fact that all right, you try to get the ball out of his hands, got to get the ball out of Dame's hand, CJ's hand. You got Gary Trent Jr. who's going to knock down open shots at this rate. Now you can throw it into Nurkic in the post. He'll be able to score on a lot of bigs, especially if they keep JaVale McGee out there because he's been bad in the restart. He's been bad. Anthony Davis needs to play the 5 as much as possible because JaVale McGee is providing little to nothing for them right now. Again, who knows if that'll change, but right now he's not providing a whole lot for the Lakers. So like I said, he can get buckets, and then Melo. I think Melo's got. Now again, I wasn't the whole like, oh, Melo's washed, but I was like, I don't know how much he contributed to playoff team. I'm not afraid to admit that. And he's been great. And granted, the Blazers were under 500 before the restart started, so it's not like they were a great team. They just so happened that the other bottom teams in the West weren't that good either. So they lucked out with that. And also again, they had injuries and things like that. But again, everyone deals with injuries to a certain degree. But he's been good. So I think he's got at least, especially if you're going against LeBron, his boy, he's got at least 1 or 2 good playoff Melo games. Whatever that means for the Blazers, I don't know. But he's gonna, again, he's at least not afraid of the moment, as you've seen in the couple of shots he's hit in the restart, where he's gonna be ready, willing, and able to knock down late game shots if the Blazers need for him to do that. Again, Dame, that's what Dame does. That's why Dame time. But if they need to get it from Melo, they can get it from Melo. So yeah, it's just I imagine the Lakers will never say this, but they really hope the Spurs or the Suns or somebody else gets that 8 seed, the Grizzlies, whoever it is. Even the Pelicans, I think they'd rather deal with that. I know a lot of people say like, oh, last time Dame played Anthony Davis in the playoffs, like he got smoked. Yes, but a lot of that was coupled with the fact that they had no real center to guard him, and at least in theory, Nurkic, Whiteside, Collins, those kind of guys can guard, at least try to guard AD. I mean, he's one of the best players in the world. Holding him to like 20 points is a good game defensively. But also they had Drew Holiday, and Drew Holiday gave Dame fits. And who was Drew Holiday on the Lakers? Let me know. It could have been Avery Bradley, but he's gone. Who's Drew Holiday? Alex Caruso? Maybe, we'll see. But again, if Dame's gonna be shooting like he was shooting tonight, where he hit, like I said, what was it, like 11 threes, something like that? Yeah, the Lakers are gonna be in trouble. Again, should they win the series? Yes. And again, most of these teams are going to be lower seeded in the bracket. But I'm telling you, these are teams that if I'm the Clippers, if I'm the Lakers, if I'm the Nuggets, I really want to be in the Jazz bracket, the Jazz Mavericks bracket. That's where I want to be. Again, the Mavs, they're bad at the end of the game. The defense is not good. The Jazz without Bogdanovic haven't looked that good in the restart. They've won some games, they haven't looked that good. And yeah, so those are the kind of teams I want. Like if I'm the Nuggets, I want the Jazz to drop to the 6. Let the Rockets, Thunder get 4 or 5, so I don't have to face them in the first round. And then again, if I'm the Clippers, I want that too, because then that means I don't got to face them in the second round. And if I'm the Lakers, I want the opposite. I want one of them to be the 6th seed and us to potentially maybe face the Jazz in the second round. Like that. That's what I would want. So again, I think the Blazers might be unavoidable if they get into the playoffs. The Blazers are going to have to play them. But going forward, I am telling you, Rockets, Thunder, Blazers. Those are teams that I think those higher seeded teams, again, they'll never say, but I think that they don't want to have to face too soon. Again, if you have to get through them, you got to get through them. It is what it is. You got to get through good teams to make it to the finals. But before you have to, like in the second round, in the first round, nope, I want no parts. Because then these teams seem equipped for this kind of environment. An environment where home court doesn't matter, the higher seed doesn't matter. Hey, you're going to see some craziness, I think, in the playoffs. You're going to see some upsets. You're going to see... It's not going to be NCAA style. It's not going to be NFL style per se, because it's not just one game. But, again, the seeds don't mean anything anymore. It's just games now. You're just playing. And like I said, the Lakers aren't looking too hot right now. They got a few games to get together, but you need to get something going before the restart. You can't just hope to turn it on. And maybe they will, but... You want to see some sort of offensive rhythm before they head into the series against the Blazers, whose offense has looked exceptional during this restart. Same thing with the Rockets. You want to go up against a team, you want to be firing on all cylinders. If you're up against that kind of team, same thing with the Thunder. You want to make sure you're firing on all cylinders. Because they're looking good right now. And again, playoffs is maybe a different story, but I do imagine some of that momentum will carry over just like it would. If it was March, I'd have been like, all right, the Lakers are ready for everybody. Because they were looking great heading into the playoffs. But now this is a whole new season, as I've been saying. This isn't that season. It may be extension of that season, but it's not the same. Teams that are playing well, like I said, players that are healthy weren't healthy before. Players that are in shape or better condition weren't in shape or better condition before. And then plus even with that, the Thunder have been good before the restart and after the restart. They've been one of the best teams in the league before and after in the last 30, 40 games. They've been like the graph they showed on ESPN on Wednesday. They have one of the top records, I think a top 4 record in the NBA. It's like December, January or something like that. So, like I said, if it's just me, I don't want to face those teams if I don't have to. But yeah, that'll do it for me here today. No, this has been another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to thank you guys, as always, for listening to me rant and rave and ramble about sports. I enjoy doing it, and I imagine you guys enjoy listening, because you guys come back and listen every week, or every other day, more or less. But yeah, so shout out to you guys for that. If you like what you've heard today, like you've heard on past episodes, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you never miss an episode. Make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, wherever you listen to your podcast, again, if you like what you hear, want to leave a review, give us a 5-star rating. Be very appreciated, very helpful. Again, obviously, if you guys like, what you guys dislike, the ways you can improve, comment, things we can talk about on the show, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media. You can find us there, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss, we can talk about the restart, we can talk about the NHL, we can talk about baseball teams that are looking good. I know some of you guys probably saw that Fernando Tatis home run the other night. I think it was last night. And just he looked almost offended that the ball was thrown to him in that manner. It's like, what? Who do you not know who I am? Do you not know what I do? That was funny. So we talk about that. Talk about NFL game ready to kick off. Teams you think are going to be good. Teams you think are going to be bad. Players you think you're going to be good. Players you think are going to be bad. College football, do you think it's going to go off? NFL, do you think it's going to go off? Hey, we can discuss all that stuff. So feel free to reach out to us there. Before I get out of here, as always, I want to shout out the essential workers. So whoever's been deemed essential, EMTs, doctors, nurses, first responders, firefighters, mail, and postal service people especially, because again, I know you guys are dealing with a rough stretch right now in terms of things that have been going on with you guys. Delivery drivers, FedEx, UPS, Amazon. Shout out to all you guys. You guys are allowing it so guys like me don't have to leave our house to get things. Very nice, very efficient, very safe. Also shout out if you're going, again, if you guys see a lot of people, as you should, if it's safe in your state. I'm going out to bars, going out to restaurants, sitting outside, of course, because you don't want to do inside, because that's, again, how it'll spread. Inside, if it's not properly ventilated, or how some of these big outbreaks have started happening. That's why some of the states that didn't have outbreaks at first are now going through that, because they opened those parts up too early. So yeah, if you're doing that, just make sure you tip your bartender, tip your waiter, waitress, whoever. If they're doing a good job, make them feel appreciated. If you're going to get your hair done, going to get your nails done, going to get lined up, make sure you tip your barber, hairdresser. I don't know what the nails people are called. Manicurists? Pedicurists? I don't know. I don't get those done. I just clip the nails myself. Though, I mean, you can get like massage ones done too. I need to go. But not now because of the Rona. But when in 2022 when everything's back to normal, I'll definitely make sure to go. Yeah, delivery drivers as well. Tip them. Because again, they're allowing you to not have to leave your house. And not even have to interact with anyone. They just drop the food off at your door if you want them to. And then just dip off. So, very convenient. But yeah. And also, wear a mask. It's very simple. You'll be fine. I promise. So yeah, that'll do it for me here today. I've been Chris Blades. That has been my time. And until next time. Peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.